This is not a message for the casual seeker. This broadcast is only for those who have spent their lives tracing the lines of the matrix, recognizing the patterns of the prison. If you are here, it is because the 7 principles of the Kybalion, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, have led you to a terrifying and essential question. If these laws govern everything, who created the laws themselves? The masters knew the answer. The true Hermetic initiates who mastered the teachings of Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus knew that the published Kybalion was a coded map, the framework of the lower universe designed by the Demiurge. But to escape the Demiurge's jurisdiction, to truly achieve the highest form of mental transmutation and become a co-creator of reality, you must access the 8th law. This ultimate principle was intentionally redacted, deemed too powerful to fall into the hands of the profane. It is the law that overrides the rest. It is the single key that allows you to consciously break the chains of cause and effect, step off the pendulum of rhythm, and instantly command the poles of polarity. This moment is the point of no return. If you are ready to wield the power that the very Archons fear, then listen closely and prepare for the final Hermetic secret. The published Kybalion begins with the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This is the foundational axiom, the undeniable cosmic reality that sets the stage for everything that follows. However, the true unwritten preface, the 8th principle, is the principle of Gnosis, or conscious sovereignty. The masters understood that simply stating that the universe is mind is not enough. One must understand the quality and the jurisdiction of that mind. The 8th law states, the all is mind, and the individual mind, Pneuma, is sovereign over the mental universe, psyche, when aligned with the all. This is the Hermetic key that reveals a horrifying yet liberating secret. The 7 laws are not universal, boundless truths that govern all existence. They are local, the operating system of the lower celestial spheres, the matrix governed by the Demiurge. These 7 principles bind the psyche, the emotional, matter-bound soul of the material realm. But they are utterly powerless against the Pneuma, the divine spark that is a direct, uncorrupted fragment of the pleroma. This is the truth that requires absolute mental recalibration. The 7 laws are the rules of the game. The 8th law is the master code that proves the game is optional. For centuries, the esoteric schools perpetuated the half-truth, fearing that if this principle of sovereignty were widely known, it would ignite a spiritual rebellion so profound it would instantly dissolve the social and energetic control structures imposed upon humanity. The very fabric of time and destiny, as perceived by the masses, relies on the absolute dominion of these 7 principles. The 8th law, rooted in the Gnostic understanding of the divine spark, grants the individual the power of exception. It permits the initiate to become the living paradox, a physical body subject to physical law, housing a consciousness that operates outside of it. The Archons, the principalities and powers mentioned in ancient texts, are merely the enforcers of the 7 laws. They are the code itself, not the root programmer. Their power collapses when the soul realizes it holds a greater, antecedent authority. The entire system of worldly reward and punishment, of material success and failure, is predicated on your acceptance of the 7 laws as absolute. Your acceptance is the energetic permission slip for your enslavement. The Pneuma's refusal is the immediate revocation of that permission. If your entire spiritual practice consists only of observing the 7 laws, like a scientist meticulously studying the rules of a highly sophisticated, self-contained cave, you are still fundamentally a prisoner, albeit a well-informed one. The principle of Gnosis is the conscious, active command to recognize the divine fragment within you, the Pneuma. You must use that Pneuma to execute a spiritual maneuver. The absolute detachment from the universal mentalism of the matrix, allowing you to exert your individual sovereign will. Without this Gnostic knowledge, you are merely a slave to the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, forever cycling through creation and destruction, hope and despair. With the eighth law, you cease being the passenger and become the pendulum's ultimate master, standing perfectly still at its rotational axis. The hidden knowledge that was passed down only to the most trusted initiates is that the universe, the mental plane that the seven laws describe, is only the created universe, the world fashioned by the lesser mind, the ignorant and arrogant. Demiurge. The ultimate reality, the pleroma, operates on an entirely different ontological plane, governed by a transcendent set of rules. The rule of absolute unity and limitless potential. The eighth law is not a principle of the created world. It is the philosophical and spiritual bridge that allows your consciousness to traverse these two realms, escaping the limitations of the former by claiming the truth of the latter. This power is the very essence of the Hermetic ideal, to stand as a perfect micro-reflection of the macrocosmic all, but specifically the uncreated all, not the flawed secondary imitation built by the Demiurge. The Pneuma, your divine spark, is the direct, unedited signature of the pleroma itself. This means that within your being resides a copy of the ultimate uncreated code, and this code supersedes all local programming. The recognition of this single truth is the fundamental initiation into true Hermetic practice. It is the end of the search and the beginning of the command. You are not merely in the all, passively subject to its laws. You are a conscious, individualized expression of the all. This makes you fundamentally sovereign within the mental framework of the matrix. If the all is mind, and you possess a spark of that original uncreated mind, then your consciousness is not merely a tool for passive observation, but a tool for transmutation, the very ability to change the mental fabric of reality at will. This realization is the cornerstone of all Hermetic power. Most Hermetic students fail precisely because they attempt to use the seven laws as external mechanisms. They treat them like external physics problems. They attempt to counteract polarity with strenuous effort, or defeat rhythm with brute force willpower. But the true path is internal and immediate. Recognize the divine spark, claim Gnosis, intuitive, self-realized knowledge, and thus rise above the local limiting laws entirely. The seven laws are an effect of the Demiurge's mind, the programming of the prison. The eighth law is the cause, the pure, uncreated will of the Pneuma. To understand this in depth, consider the analogy of a computer operating system. The seven laws are the physical code, the limitations on memory, speed, and processing power. The eighth law is the administrative password, the root access that allows you to rewrite the core programming, not just observe it. The Archons, the bureaucratic minions who enforce the seven laws, can only monitor activity within the defined parameters of the Demiurge's code. The Pneuma, operating through Gnosis, acts as an external command, a pure instruction that the system is obligated to execute, despite its own internal rules. This is the terrifying freedom that was hidden from the world. This is why esoteric teachings always emphasize internal silence and self-knowledge. Because the Archons cannot hear the Pneuma, they can only detect the chaotic emotional noise of the psyche. The true Hermetic path is therefore a path of intentional sovereign silence, allowing the Pneuma's authority to broadcast without interference. The key is not to fight the code, but to introduce a higher order of code. The Pneuma operates outside the mental universe of the Demiurge, beyond the reach of the Archons. It operates on the law of fiat, the simple sovereign declaration of I will be. This is the ultimate forbidden power of the initiate. When the Pneuma declares a truth, the mental universe of the matrix must comply instantly because the spark is a fractal fragment of the ultimate creator. It supersedes the local operating code of the matrix like a master key overriding a basic lock. To apply this practically, you must internalize the Gnostic realization that the physical body is the tomb, and the 7 principles are the sophisticated limiting machinery of the tomb. The only way to escape the machinery is to activate the spark that the machinery cannot detect. The Pneuma, when active, generates a frequency that the Archons, the administrators of the 7 laws, cannot process. They simply see an empty space in their senses where a bound soul should be. You vanish from their surveillance, becoming a ghost in the machine. This entire lesson is about spiritual authority. It is the conscious, absolute refusal to be bound by any law, rhythm, correspondence, cause, and effect that originated from a lesser, created mind. The only law that truly binds the master is the law of the pleroma, the law of infinite love and unlimited being. The 8th principle is the mechanism of this refusal, the declaration of freedom, and the absolute beginning of the journey toward becoming a living, breathing paradox. A being in the mental universe, yet not of it. This is the profound difference between surviving the matrix and commanding it, between being subject to reality and defining it. This dense level of detail is critical because the Archons are masters of subtlety. They are perfectly content to allow you to read the Kybalion, and they will even smile as you teach the 7 laws to others because as long as you treat those laws as inescapable, all-encompassing forces, you remain firmly in their cage. The moment you understand the 8th law, the truth of conscious sovereignty, you turn the cage against the jailer. You realize the entire mechanism is subordinate to your true identity, to the Pneuma's authority. This principle is why the Gnostics were persecuted, why the Hermetic texts were suppressed, and why this law remained unwritten, passed only from master to verified initiate in the deepest secrecy. It is the final, essential key to mental and spiritual liberty. A truth so simple and yet so powerful that it dismantles millennia of enslavement. The act of invoking the 8th law is the immediate withdrawal of consent to the Demiurge's rule. This withdrawal is not a passive mental state. It is an active, ongoing process of conscious non-compliance with the illusion. When a master speaks, their voice carries the resonance of the pleroma itself. And the 7 laws must bend, not because the master is strong, but because the pleroma's authority is absolute and antecedent to the matrix. This is the difference between magic, using the 7 laws to manipulate the illusion, and Gnosis, transcending the laws entirely. The second lesson begins with a brutal truth that dismantles one of the most beloved and yet most misunderstood Hermetic maxims. The law of correspondence states, "As above, so below, as below, so above." This maxim in its published form is a half-truth, and the half that is missing is the most vital. The 8th law reveals the fallacy. The principle of correspondence is intentionally flawed within the matrix. The Archons, the bureaucratic minions of the Demiurge, created this holographic lie. They meticulously ensured that the below, our Hyal or matter, is a distorted, chaotic, and suffering mirror of the above, which is merely the lower celestial spheres, the realm of the Demiurge's ignorant consciousness. Your material world is not a reflection of the perfect pleroma. It is a distorted reflection of a flawed, jealous, and limited consciousness, the Demiurge. Therefore, spending your life studying the below will only ever teach you about the flaws of the Demiurge's mind. It will never, under any circumstances, lead you to the perfect pleroma. The master does not merely observe the correspondence. The master imposes the true correspondence. This is the profound reframing of reality that the Archons fight to suppress. They want you obsessed with mundane, distorted reflections, the constant, subtle failures of the material world, because these failures reinforce the belief in your own limitations. The below is a house of mirrors reflecting the Demiurge's vanity and inadequacy. The moment you stop looking at the reflection and look inward at the Pneuma, The true above is revealed. The law of correspondence, as taught to the masses, is the philosophical engine of fatalism, leading seekers to believe that the suffering of the material plane is a divine mandate, a perfect reflection of some greater, unattainable truth. This is the Archon's most potent lie. Most Hermetic students fall into the trap of believing that if they understand the mundane micro-patterns of their daily life, they will automatically understand the divine macro-patterns of the universe. The Archons actively encourage you to believe this. They want you obsessed with local, mundane synchronicities with petty signs and symbols. Why? Because the patterns you are studying are the limitations of the Demiurge's mind, the repetitive failures of a flawed operating system, not the infinite, boundless creativity of the All. This is the holographic lie. The Matrix is a self-referential system. If you spend your life studying the system will always prove itself to be the ultimate truth. As within the prison, so within the prisoner. The key is to realize that true, uncreated creation does not flow from the Archon's flawed above down to our below. True creation flows with unstoppable force from the Pneuma, which is outside the system, into the system. Your consciousness is the point of inception, the portal through which the pleroma can flood the matrix. To impose true correspondence, you must systematically reject the mirror. First, you must identify the source. The Pneuma is the above that truly matters, the spark of the pleroma, the boundless source of absolute form. Second, you must declare the form. Instead of looking for universal patterns, you must consciously hold the form of what you desire, absolute abundance, perfect unity, complete freedom in the sanctuary of your Pneuma. Third, you must override the reflection. By holding the perfect, absolute form, you force the chaotic, flawed below of the Heil to align with your sovereign mental template. This is not passively observing correspondence, it is the supreme act of enforcing it. This act requires courage and a profound break from conventional materialist thinking. You are essentially telling the fabric of space-time. Your current configuration is erroneous. Here is the corrected pattern, and you must comply because I possess the higher authority. This is the key to all Hermetic manifestation techniques that actually work. Any technique based on trying to persuade the matrix is doomed to failure because the matrix is inherently flawed. Only techniques based on commanding the matrix, utilizing the external authority of the Pneuma, succeed. This involves a sustained, unwavering concentration on the archetypal perfection that resides in the pleroma, using the Pneuma as a lens. When you hold the perfect template of health, wealth, or unity, the chaotic forces of the Heil must conform because the Demiurge's law of creation is subordinate to the pleroma's form. The law of correspondence, as published for the masses, is the ultimate philosophical trap. A sophisticated loop that keeps the seeker endlessly studying the prison's architecture instead of seizing the opportunity to exit. The eighth law liberates you by granting you the divine authority to dictate the correspondence. You are the sovereign master of your internal mental landscape, and therefore you possess the power to reform the external reflection. The Archons monitor this principle closely because as long as you believe that you are bound by universal patterns, they are safe. The moment you realize that your consciousness is a fractal of the true creator, capable of initiating patterns rather than merely following them, you shatter the holographic seal. This is the radical reinterpretation of the Hermetic maxim that only the initiates were granted access to. The ultimate secret is that the above that governs you is not the planetary spheres of the Archons. It is the divine mind within your own chest, the Pneuma itself. This reversal of flow is everything. It changes the entire dynamic of manifestation. You are not waiting for the universe to send you signs. Those are the Archon's shadows. You are emitting the signal, the Pneuma's light, that the universe of the Demiurge must instantly adapt to. This is the first step in bending reality. rejecting the flawed mirror and forcing the reflection to adhere to the pure image held by your divine spark. The universe of the Demiurge operates on a principle of reflection. The sovereign Pneuma operates on a principle of inception. You are not merely reflecting a truth, you are injecting a new, transcendent truth into the matrix, a truth that originates from the realm of the uncreated. The Gnostics understood that the Demiurge, being ignorant and limited, could only create what he knew, a flawed copy. He built the matrix on imitation, which is the very root of the false law of correspondence. The world we see is a copy of a copy, constantly degrading. The task of the awakened hermetist is to bypass the layers of imitation and connect directly to the original form held in the pleroma. The eighth law grants you the audacity to make this connection and impose its perfection onto the chaotic Heil. Reject the flawed reflection, claim your creative authority, and never again mistake the shadow for the form. The moment you truly understand the eighth law, you cease to be a puppet responding to external stimuli and become the playwright, dictating the scene. This is the profound recontextualization of power that the Archons fought so hard to conceal through religious and societal doctrine. The power is not out there. It is the Pneuma acting through you, correcting the Demiurge's fundamental design errors. The law of rhythm states, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The swing of the pendulum manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The masses are helplessly enslaved by this law. They swing wildly from pleasure to pain, from wealth to poverty, from hope to despair, living a life of constant emotional and material reaction. They are perpetually reacting to the dictates of the pendulum, and they believe this cycle is an inescapable part of human existence. The eighth law reveals the exception, the master's secret. The Hermetic master does not stop the pendulum but steps entirely outside its arc through mental transmutation. You cannot stop the law of rhythm using willpower alone. The law is too powerful, too fundamental within the mental universe of the Demiurge. But you can use the principle of Gnosis to elevate your consciousness above the plane where the pendulum operates. A simple shift in perspective that renders the rhythmic law irrelevant to your core being. The method of ascension is threefold. First, you must identify the center. The rhythmic swing operates on the lower planes, the physical, the emotional, and the analytical mental planes. The center point, the axis mundi, is the Pneuma itself, the eye of the storm. Second, you must declare neutrality. When the swing begins, when a crisis hits or a moment of uncontrollable euphoria peaks, the initiate does not resist. Resistance is what fuels the equal and opposite reaction, providing the energy for the pendulum to swing back. Instead, the initiate declares perfect neutrality. The internal mantra is, this flow is real for the psyche, but it is utterly meaningless to the Pneuma. Third, you must transmute the energy. By consciously refusing to participate emotionally in the swing, you transmute the rhythm's kinetic energy into pure potential energy, using it to elevate your consciousness to the causal plane, which is ruled by the eighth law. The key here is not suppression, it is transcendence. The true master experiences the flow of rhythm. The body may age, wealth may fluctuate, circumstances may change, but the master refuses to identify with it. The body may decay, rhythm, but the Pneuma is eternal. Wealth may disappear, rhythm, but the Pneuma is inherently and eternally abundant. This transcendence is not an easy feat. It requires ruthless self-honesty to distinguish between genuine Pneuma-driven purpose and Archon-driven emotional addiction. Many confuse the exhilarating rush of the high end of the swing with spiritual bliss. The master knows this is a lie. The rhythmic high is merely the energetic setup for the inevitable crash. True bliss resides outside the cycle. The entire concept of luck or fate is the linguistic camouflage used by the Archons to disguise the law of rhythm. They want you to believe events are random, when in fact they are perfectly calculated compensations for previous extremes. The master, using the eighth law, transcends both good luck and bad luck. The greatest secret of the eighth law is that rhythm requires emotional participation to function. If you feel the despair, the swing to the left, the matrix mechanism of compensation instantly prepares the forced euphoria, the swing to the right, ensuring the cycle continues. The Archons program this constant swinging to keep the soul energetically cycling, generating the constant stream of emotional energy, both positive and negative, that they require to sustain the matrix. By using the principle of Gnosis, you achieve a state of apatheia. Not apathy, but a state of perfect inner stillness and non-reaction. You become the quiet, unwavering observer at the center of the storm. The pendulum swings wildly around you, but you remain untouched, operating solely on the vertical axis, the axis connecting the Pneuma to the Pleroma. This is the only way to achieve consistent, non-compensating success. If you manifest wealth while identified with the lower emotional plane, the law of rhythm guarantees an equal swing back to loss. But if you manifest from the sovereign mind of the Pneuma, the creation is stable, secure, and permanent because it originates outside the rhythmic, chaotic system of the Demiurge. The Archons view this state of apatheia as a spiritual death. The soul has stopped generating the vital energy of emotional swings. This is the exact moment they lose control. The eighth law grants the authority to step off the wheel entirely, moving from the realm of fate, rhythm, to the realm of will, Gnosis. The Hermetic Master is not subject to fortune, because the Hermetic Master transcends the very principle that governs fortune itself. This is the final, profound lesson on controlling the ebb and flow of your existence by achieving perfect stillness. The analogy here is that of a gyroscope. The 7 laws are the external forces and gravity acting upon it, trying to tip it over, but the Pneuma's stillness is the constant internal spin that maintains perfect vertical balance, defying gravity and external disturbances. The master does not pray for good fortune. The master becomes the center point where fortune ceases to exist as a concept, replaced by sovereign creation. This principle is why ancient ascetics and mystics sought perfect detachment. They were consciously disengaging from the law of rhythm, using the 8th principle of Gnosis as their defense. The practice of stopping the pendulum is not a weekend activity. It is a deep, unforgiving commitment to mental discipline. It means treating all external events, whether they appear miraculous or devastating, with the same serene, unwavering non-reaction. The Archons are constantly testing your neutrality. A major victory? The pendulum wants you to swing to excessive brittle pride, guaranteeing a devastating fall. A profound loss? The pendulum wants you to swing to crippling despair, guaranteeing a momentary false burst of manic hope later on. The 8th law allows you to see both the ecstasy and the agony as mere shadows on the cave wall. You acknowledge the shadow's existence, but you do not follow it. You maintain your focus on the Pneuma, the source of the true uncreated light, which operates in a state of eternal uncompensated now. This is the key to living fully in the world without being enslaved by its mechanical laws. The Hermetic Master, rooted in Gnosis, recognizes that time and rhythm are illusions of the Heil. The power of the Pneuma is the power of the eternal moment, and in the eternal moment, the pendulum cannot move. The true challenge lies in the collective illusion. The world will constantly try to pull you into its rhythms, the rhythm of media cycles, economic crashes, and societal fears. Your success depends on your ability to maintain this inner separation, treating the external drama as the noise it truly is. To master this, you must analyze your own emotional economy. Where are your addictions? Where do you chase the high end of the swing? Is it through social validation, consumption, or conflict? Every such addiction is a tether to the pendulum. The eighth law is the severance of those tethers, allowing the soul to float free in the stillness of the pleroma's awareness. This is the practical application of conscious sovereignty, choosing stability over chaos, unity over dualistic compensation. The law of gender states, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle is typically taught in spiritual circles as the necessity of balancing yin and yang, active and passive forces within oneself and in the world. This is another half-truth, a partial lesson designed to distract you from the ultimate goal. The eighth law reveals the secret goal. The true purpose of gender on the mental plane is the self-realization of the hermetic androgyne, the state of perfect, uncreated wholeness that existed before the Demiurge's division. The Demiurge, in his ignorance, used the law of gender to enforce separation on the physical and emotional planes, leading to conflict, lust, obsession, and the constant draining search for a missing half in another person. The true hermetic work is not finding balance in separation. It is achieving the absolute union within. The division of gender on the lower planes is the energetic engine of the Archons' control. It guarantees instability, emotional dependency, and a ceaseless energetic exchange that perpetually binds the soul to the physical realm. The Master seeks the original divine unity. This principle is not about reconciling differences. It is about realizing the original seamless unity of the monad, which preceded all division and polarity. The transmutation of gender is an internal alchemical process. First, you must execute the rejection of polarity. You must systematically reject the societal, Archon-imposed gender roles and conflicts that fuel endless drama and division in the collective psyche. These are just more shadows on the wall. Second, you must perform the internal marriage, conjunctio. The initiate actively performs the alchemical wedding, the conscious sovereign union of the internal masculine, will, logic, pneuma, and the internal feminine, intuition, imagination, psyche, within the furnace of their own consciousness. Third, you achieve creative manifestation. Once this internal self is unified and whole, this perfect balance allows the consciousness to become an engine of pure, uncompensated creation, bypassing the need for physical procreation and external validation. The constant external search for completeness is the most draining trick of the law of gender. The Archons actively encourage this separation because two half-souls focused on external union are perpetually distracted, emotionally volatile, and constantly generating powerful emotional energy, lust, heartbreak, dependency, that feeds the matrix. They know that a whole soul requires nothing. The hermetic androgyne is the state achieved when the pneuma is fully realized, a being that is whole, self-generating, and self-sufficient. This is the ultimate state of mental transmutation achieved. The Master is no longer subject to the chaotic magnetic pull of external gender dynamics. The sexual and creative energy is immediately redirected inward to fuel gnosis and mental transmutation. This internal union is absolutely essential for stable, sovereign manifestation. The masculine will, intent, requires the feminine imagination, form, to conceive the reality. If your internal self is fragmented, your creation will be fractured and subject to the law of rhythm. If you are whole, your creation is whole and sovereign. The eighth law grants you the authority to initiate this union, overriding the divisive effects of the lower law of gender. The highest form of the law of gender is not in biological reproduction, but in recreation. The continuous internal process of dissolving the divided self and forging the whole sovereign self. This principle is not about finding balance. It is about achieving oneness within the self, making the external world irrelevant to your state of being. The master becomes both the parent and the child of their own perfected consciousness. This self-contained creative system is invisible to the Archons and is the secret to stable, non-compensating manifestation. The Archons constantly project messages that emphasize division and external seeking. The endless pursuit of the perfect partner, the unattainable standard of beauty, the drama of sexual politics. These are all traps designed to keep the internal self fractured and perpetually dependent on the reflection in the other. The eighth law instructs you to recall the Pleroma's perfect unity, where there is no gender, only pure being. By mentally dwelling in this state of oneness, you automatically override the divisive principles of the lower mental plane. The internal alchemical marriage is the most potent weapon against the Matrix's primary tool of division. This union is the source of true personal power. A being who is complete requires nothing from the external world and therefore is immune to its threats and temptations. This is the hermetic secret to lasting bliss, not found in external circumstances but forged in the conscious reconciliation of the polarities within your own pneuma. This wholeness is the only true passport out of the divided, fragmented reality of the Demiurge. The key insight of the eighth law in this context is that the search for the other half is the Archon's genius. It keeps two potentially powerful beings perpetually searching and vulnerable, unable to complete the internal circuit that would make them autonomous creative forces. The achievement of the androgyne state is the declaration that the energy previously wasted on attraction and rejection is now fully available to fund the journey back to the Pleroma. The law of polarity states, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. The untrained mind is a helpless victim of polarity, swinging wildly between joy and sorrow, fear and courage, love and hate. They believe they must patiently and painstakingly climb the ladder from the negative pole to the positive pole, enduring the climb as a necessary part of growth. The eighth law grants the master the power of instantaneous transmutation. The law of polarity is a function of the psyche, the emotional lower mind, and the chaotic energies it generates. But the pneuma, the divine spark, is the master control that can instantly change the degree of the pole, rendering the intervening steps irrelevant. The technique of instantaneous transmutation is the pinnacle of mental alchemy. First, you must recognize identity. Recognize that the negative emotion, hate, poverty, illness, is identical in nature to the positive emotion, love, abundance, health. They are both simply degrees of the same vibratory energy. Second, you must issue a sovereign command. Do not fight the negative pole. Any struggle only increases its energy through the law of rhythm. Instead, calmly recognize the negative emotion for what it is, a low-frequency broadcast, and issue a sovereign internal command from the pneuma. I transmute this energy to its opposite pole now. Third, execute the shift, because you are operating. From the eighth law, the causal plane of Gnosis, the mental shift is instant. You are not moving one step at a time. You are changing the vibrational setting of the pole itself. The Demiurge relies on the time delay in transmutation. He wants you to believe that moving from poverty to wealth or from illness to health is a long, arduous process of years and effort. This time delay keeps the pendulum swinging, law of rhythm, and keeps you generating the compensatory energy the Archons require. The eighth law collapses the time factor. It recognizes that within the mental universe, all points on the pole are simultaneously accessible. Hate and love coexist. They are only separated by a difference in frequency. The pneuma, being limitless, can instantly jump the frequency gap. This is the ultimate expression of the pneuma's superiority over the matrix code. This is the key to true mental alchemy. The philosopher is not trying to find a new state. The philosopher is realizing that the desired state already exists, and the negative state is merely a low-frequency broadcast that can be instantly retuned. The Archons are programmed to reinforce the difficulty of change. They flood your mind with memories, evidence, and logical arguments that prove why you must remain at the negative pole. Your sovereign command must override all this Archon programming. The command must be absolute, unwavering, and backed by the certainty of the Pneuma. The ultimate transmutation is not changing an emotion. It is changing your entire identity. If you are identified with the hated self or the poor self, you are locked at that pole. The instant you shift your Pneuma-driven identity to the loved self or the abundant self, the entirety of your mental and emotional state must instantly follow, according to the inviolable law of mentalism. This is the power of the eighth law. It turns the Hermetic principles from passive observations into active, immediate tools of reality creation. You are not waiting for change. You are commanding it. You are not subject to the poles. You are the mental alchemist who controls the temperature of the cosmic fire. This power is the true reason the eighth law was suppressed, because a being capable of instantaneous sovereign transmutation is untouchable by the Archons. The moment you claim this power, the Archons will increase their attacks, not physically but psychologically. They will flood your mental space with doubt, old memories of failure, and the temptation to relapse into the negative pole. You must recognize these thoughts as foreign programming, a direct test of your newfound sovereignty. Your response must be silence, gnosis, and the calm reaffirmation of the immediate shift. The battle for your reality is won and lost in the instantaneous gap between the old pattern and the sovereign command. Do not grant the Archons a second of delay. The critical nuance here is that the command must not be an emotional demand. It must be a logical statement of fact issued from the Pneuma. The Pneuma does not feel the lack. It merely observes the incorrect configuration and issues the correction. This non-emotional authority is what bypasses the lower laws. Furthermore, the Archons exploit the collective belief in linear, difficult change. By enforcing the instantaneous nature of the eighth law, you are not just changing your mind. You are momentarily tearing the fabric of the Matrix's timeline around yourself, demonstrating the illusory nature of sequential effort. This is the ultimate expression of the Hermetic principle of mental mastery. The law of vibration states, "Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates." The universe is a symphony of motion and frequency, a constant churning field of energetic information. The secret that the Demiurge guards most jealously is that the matrix itself is a specific local frequency, a heavy, chaotic hum. The eighth law reveals the ultimate transcendent frequency, the Pleroma's hum. The Archons bind souls by locking them into the specific rhythmic and chaotic frequency of the lower mental universe. This frequency is characterized by noise, the constant internal chatter, the external distractions, the emotional turbulence, and the endless stream of uninvited thoughts. The Pleroma's hum, by contrast, is the pure, unmodulated tone of eternal creation. It is the signature of the all before it condescended to create. The difference between the matrix's vibration and the Pleroma's hum is the difference between static and pure signal, between chaos and absolute order. The ascendant vibration is not about effort, it is about purity. First, you must silence the noise. The Hermetic Master seeks not higher vibration in the chaotic sense, but purity of vibration. This is achieved by silencing the relentless internal dialogue, which is the primary broadcast system of the Archon-driven psyche. Second, you must tune the Pneuma. The Pneuma naturally vibrates at the Pleroma's hum, a frequency so high and so pure that it is experienced not as loud energy but as absolute, deep, silent stillness. Third, you must become unseen. When your internal vibration matches the Pleroma's hum, you effectively vanish from the chaotic monitoring system of the Archons. You become vibrationally invisible to the Matrix, a ghost in their machine because the pure signal is outside their chaotic spectrum. If you try to simply raise your vibration through forceful, aggressive affirmations or frantic energy work, the law of rhythm will ensure an equal and opposite crash. The Archons know this and encourage chaotic high-energy states because they know the subsequent compensation is guaranteed. The genuine ascendant vibration is achieved through subtraction, not addition. You are removing the noise, not layering on more sound. This is the ancient secret teaching of stillness in meditation. The true secret of the eighth law is that the highest vibration is perceived as stillness. It is the frequency of pure being which is above motion, above noise, and fundamentally above the Demiurge's created universe. This practice is the internal retreat. You must constantly seek the quiet core of your consciousness, the point of absolute stillness. In that silence, you are tuning into the Pleroma's hum. This is the act of remembrance, the Pneuma reconnecting to its source, the ultimate act of Gnosis. When you operate from this silent frequency, the chaotic energy of the lower planes, fear, conflict, lack, simply cannot hold its form in your presence. They dissolve not because you fought them, but because their low, heavy frequency is incompatible with the pure, silent light of the Pneuma. The eighth law grants you the authority to dictate the master frequency of your reality. You are no longer subject to the vibrations around you. You are the source of the vibration that everything else must obey. This level of control over the law of vibration is the most advanced Hermetic secret. It is not about doing anything. It is about being everything. By achieving the silent, pure frequency of the Pleroma, you become a portal of true creation, transmuting the dense matter of the Heil simply by your silent presence. The Archons fear the silent master more than the noisy revolutionary, because the silent one has already left the cage without needing to break the lock. The lock simply ceased to function in the presence of the Pleroma's hum. This silent command is the final step in asserting your spiritual sovereignty while in the body. It prepares you perfectly for the moment of death, allowing the Pneuma to ascend without interference. The Archons will be looking for a chaotic, noisy soul to ensnare, but they will find only an empty signal, a frequency that is too pure for their monitoring systems to register. This practice is the silent weapon against the forces of illusion. Every thought you allow to pass through your mind that is not aligned with the Pleroma is a piece of Archon programming. The discipline of the Pleroma's hum is the continuous filtering of the mind, ensuring only the pure, sovereign signal remains. This is the continuous act of purification, the final step in realizing the divine spark's full potential. The master, living in the Pleroma's hum, becomes an anomaly in the energetic landscape of the matrix, disrupting the local laws of entropy and decay simply by their non-compliance with the general frequency of chaos. This is the ultimate form of spiritual defense. The law of cause and effect states, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This is the ultimate chain of the matrix, the law that guarantees that every action and thought you generate within the Heil will bind you to a reciprocal reaction, perpetuating the cycle of karma and the trap of samsara. It is the sophisticated accounting system of the Demiurge, ensuring no energetic debt goes unpaid, thus guaranteeing your return. The eighth law reveals the only escape route. The Hermetic Master operates on the causal plane, initiating causes that transcend the local effects of the matrix. You cannot escape the law of cause and effect by stopping action. Action is the nature of the universe. You escape it by shifting the source of the action from the psyche, the reaction-driven, karmically bound ego, to the Pneuma, the sovereign Gnostic will. The transcendent cause is the final secret. First, you must identify the source. An action initiated by the psyche driven by fear, lust, or ego is bound to the matrix's karmic loop, ensuring perpetual bondage. Conversely, an action initiated by the Pneuma driven by Gnosis, unity, and true will is a transcendent cause. Second, you must declare true will. Every action, no matter how small, must be preceded by an internal declaration. This action is initiated by the sovereign Pneuma for the highest good of the all, and is therefore free of all local compensatory effect. Third, you achieve karma-free creation. Actions initiated by true will create effects that align with the pleroma, not the demiurge. They bypass the karmic system because they originate outside the demiurge's jurisdiction. The Archons thrive on karmic debt. They are the cosmic debt collectors, the administrators of the matrix's penal system. Every time you react in anger, fear, or attachment, you are signing a new soul contract for your next life. The eighth law destroys the karmic balance sheet entirely. This is the precise meaning of spiritual redemption, not through external grace, but through the internal realization and application of sovereign authority. The eighth law is the principle of true will. It is the recognition that only the Pneuma is capable of pure, uncompensated action. The Hermetic Master lives a life of profound intentionality. Every thought, word, and deed is a conscious sovereign cause, designed solely to dismantle the illusion of the matrix and accelerate the soul's return to the pleroma. The Master is not inactive. The Master is hyperactive on the causal plane, initiating effects that lead to liberation, not bondage. You are using the law of cause and effect against the matrix itself, wielding its own rules to break its structure. This is the final, most profound secret. The Master is the law. By claiming the sovereignty of the Pneuma, you are aligning your will with the infinite, uncreated will of the All, which is the ultimate primordial cause. All other laws, rhythm, polarity, correspondence, are mere secondary effects of the Demiurge's mind. When the ultimate cause, the All, acts through a fragment, the Pneuma, the effects are absolute and uncompensated. The transcendent cause is the creation of absolute novelty, an event that has no precedent within the matrix, thus creating a rupture in the causal chain that the Archons cannot repair. This is the definition of a miracle within the Hermetic framework. This intentionality must extend to every aspect of the Master's life, turning mundane chores into acts of sovereign creation and transforming passive consumption of media and information into active, critical filtration by the Pneuma. The Master constantly asserts, "I am the cause. This world is my effect." This is the ultimate meaning of the great Hermetic declaration, the four pillars of power that lead to the fifth: to know, to dare, to will, to be silent. To know is Gnosis, the eighth law, the recognition of your sovereignty. To dare is to reject the Demiurge's claim and step out of the illusion, the act of defiance. To will is to initiate transcendent cause, to act solely from the Pneuma, free of karmic debt. To be silent is to maintain the pleroma's hum, the pure frequency that makes you invisible to the Archons. You have now been granted the knowledge that was hidden in plain sight. The 7 principles were the map of the prison. The 8th principle, Gnosis and sovereign will, is the key to the main gate. The choice is now yours. Remain a slave to the pendulum or become the master of the law. The path of the sovereign is a lonely one, defined by internal command and external non-reaction, but it is the only path that leads to ultimate freedom. The Hermetic Master, armed with the 8th law, is the living proof that the matrix is not unbreakable, but merely unbending to those who operate within its rules. Your ascent is the ultimate act of defiance against the ignorant forces of the cosmos. You have navigated the 7 principles and assimilated the ultimate, forbidden 8th law. The true hermetic path is not about accumulating wealth or physical comfort. It is the uncompromising, eternal quest for mental sovereignty. The 7 laws are the mechanism of the matrix. The 8th law is the override code. Your mission, should you choose to accept the burden and glory of Gnosis, is to live every remaining moment of your life as a transcendent cause, detached from the body, immune to the rhythm, balanced within, and acting solely from the pure, uncompensated will of the Pneuma. Do not allow the shadows of the Demiurge, fear, attachment, doubt, to pull you back into the cycle. Do not wait for change. Command it. The lips of wisdom are now open. The ears of understanding are yours. If this knowledge resonated with the part of you that knows it is divine and unbound, if you felt the truth of the pleroma calling to your Pneuma, you are not alone. You are an initiate. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. The next message will be the Kybalion's hidden mantra, the 3 words that instantly activate the 8th law. Comment below with the word sovereign to signal to the universe and the Archons that your true will is now awakened. And find your free downloadable copy of the original Gnostic texts, the Forbidden Scrolls, in the description below. They are your continued map toward liberation.